Hi, my name is George Anthony. I'm doing my Masters of Business Administration from University of San Francisco. Today I will be doing an interview on a project based on human resource management and the topic would be diversity at workplace. I will be interviewing Alison Nerd and Angie Maffio from University of San Francisco, the Department of International Programs. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Angie Maffio. I'm the director of the International Programs Office here at University of St. Francis.
Okay. So my first question would be, what do you think the most challenging aspect of working in a diverse working environment is?
So I think the most challenging aspect of working in a diverse working environment is trying to get other people to understand different cultures and to work with them in a way that's not contentious, or to try to see the other person's perspective rather than just thinking that they're trying to disagree with them. They may be seeing it from a different perspective based on cultural heritage or beliefs or just patterns that it's just a different way of looking at things. So trying to get people to understand how to navigate that is probably the most challenging part.
Thank you. And the next question would be, can you give me an example of a time when you worked with or helped someone of a different culture background of your own?
Sure. Well, I help someone with a different cultural background than my own every day, and I really have for my entire career. That's really what I've been focused on is international relations, cultural understanding, communication. So my whole mantra, I guess, is just that everyone should be valued for an individual person, regardless of their background or cultural heritage or skin color or culture. And I just try in my life and I feel like it's my life's work to just try to get people to value the individual person. So working with people from diverse backgrounds comes naturally to me, and I think that's a big way that I can make the biggest impact in the world is by just working in this environment.
Thank you. So, what strategies have you used to respond to diversity challenges?
So, as you know, a lot of times with diversity challenges, there are misunderstandings, and I think a lot of it has to do with not understanding different ways that people communicate with each other. So, or different forms of eye contact. Maybe it's like physical contact as far as handshaking and things like that. If there is, we try to be proactive as much as possible in the international office. For example, like during our orientations with our international students, we try to tell them what is expected in American culture. But we've done trainings in the past, and we do work with faculty and advisors and other employees here to try to help them understand, the challenges they may face in communicating with people from different backgrounds. I think that being proactive is really important, but sometimes there are situations that require a reactive stance, and in that case it's really trying to understand what the issue was. So sometimes plagiarism, academic integrity will come up. That's a common issue with international students because it's not something that happens in other cultures. So for an international student to try to adapt to the American way in that way is very difficult sometimes. And sometimes professors will see it as, they're plagiarizing, they're doing a horrible thing. But in their mind, even though they know that in the US this is a thing, it's not something that's innate in their culture. So they don't feel like they're doing something wrong necessarily, even though they know, or maybe they don't even realize that they're doing something wrong. So there are often a lot of times conversations with the students, with the professors about this and how to navigate that. But it's a very, very common issue. It's nothing, most cases, international students are not trying to do anything wrong or bad. They just are not understanding or not remembering or not internalizing what that means to them. So that's probably the most frequent issue that we have.
Thank you.
Yep.
So, how has diversity played a part in your career?
So diversity has always been a part of my career. My family grew up hosting exchange students in high school, so they would stay with us for a year at a time. And then afterwards, I just got really interested in that. I studied political science, international studies, so I was always interested in how on the big scale, countries were interacting with each other, and then on a smaller scale, how humans are just humans, and what that means in the context of their countries coming into contact with each other. So, like the U.S. State Department, one of their biggest projects is international education to foster understanding between different people and connections between people, rather than like country, but just the person-to-person connections. A lot of the world leaders, most of them, I mean many of them, have had international study abroad types of experiences that help them understand person at an individual level rather than looking at, what is the country's politics. So I think that diversity in the international sense has played a huge role in my life, but also I find myself, because I am a white female, sometimes it's easier for me to translate that vision, I guess, to other white people, I guess, because I feel like I can really relate with any diverse populations. And I don't know, maybe in some way that helps them to be an ally and advocate for them. Whenever sometimes it's not really easy to understand what the other side, or, what diverse opinions are coming from or where they're coming from. So yeah, diversity is huge in my life and I love it. It exists in the world and we have to encounter people from all different types of places and backgrounds. So it's best to understand how we can work together rather than trying to find the differences. We can find the similarities with each other. So yeah.
Thank you. That's a great answer. So what's your understanding of diversity and why it is important to your position?
Well, again, it's kind of like the other questions, but diversity is important to my position because, everyone is, people in the U.S. and Americans, everyone is diverse, to be honest. Everyone has their own personality and their own family backgrounds and things like that. So whereas you might have one conflict between two people who may look the same, as soon as you add another variable in there, like a cultural difference or a skin color difference or a language barrier, it just makes that conflict a little bit more magnified. So diversity, understanding what diversity is, and just understanding the differences that people bring to the table, it's really important. And in international education, obviously, we're sending students abroad to other countries. We would like to have them have an understanding, some cultural competence about what it's like to live in a different culture, and rather than just, having one viewpoint and one way of life that you've grown up with, or one cultural context, one political context, but what is it like to live in another country? What do the people there think? It's interesting to see that because a lot of times they have no idea how educated the rest of the world is and how really self-centered in a way Americans can be. They don't know a lot about, in many cases, they don't know a lot about the rest of the world, partially because our country is really big, but also partially because of what the media puts out there. A lot of it's internal, or if it's a conflict with another country, rather than like the good things that are happening. So I think that on the other side, in the International Programs Office, we have the international students coming in to offer that perspective to people who aren't able to go out, and to give a different perspective in the classroom to students to kind of think outside of their little box and to see the bigger picture, and to see that there's not only one way to view something, there's not only one solution, but there are a lot of different opinions, different backgrounds, different values that are coming into play. And normally we share the same types of values, but sometimes people don't see that right off the bat. So I think having these types of experiences in international education is super, super important.
Well, thank you for interviewing me. My name is Allison Hurd. I'm the Director of Institutional Diversity and Title IX Coordinator here at the University of St. Francis.
Okay. So the question is, what do you think the most challenging aspect of working in a diverse working environment is?
I would say the most challenging part is probably getting people to value diversity as much as you do. So I am a strong proponent of diversity. I feel like diversity and inclusion only makes an organization or people stronger. And sometimes I feel like people sometimes feels like it's taking something away from you, or you have to give up part of yourself to be able to include someone else, but you don't. I feel like with diversity, it only enriches you. It helps you to grow. It helps you to be a fuller person. understanding that your background isn't the only other background. So that's probably the most challenging component. It's just getting people to place as much value on it and importance as you might.
Thank you, ma'am. So, the next question would be, can you give me an example of a time when you worked with or helped somebody of a different culture, background of your own?
Sure. Well, I have the pleasure, I think, because the University of St. Francis is such a diverse place. I think a lot of times people only think about it in terms of racial background, but there are so many different ways that diversity plays itself out. So, for example, in terms of gender, in terms of religion, in terms of socioeconomic background. I know, for example, I was a first-generation college student, so I was the first in my generation to ever attend a college or university. Neither of my parents ever attended or earned an associate's or even a bachelor's degree. They just didn't attend. So there were a lot of sacrifices they made for me to be in college. But I would say definitely all of my work in Title IX and making sure that we are not susceptible to gender-based violence, that people aren't discriminated against just based upon gender. I would say that gives me definitely a daily basis to interact with people, to be an advocate for them. Certainly, even though we're a Catholic university and we're about 55% Catholic, there's another maybe 22% of our population that identifies as Christian. So that means that not everybody is Catholic. It means that I interact with people who are Jewish. I interact with people who are Muslim. I interact with people who don't have any type of religious affiliation at all. Some people who feel like they're more spiritual than anything. So I would say I just try to open myself not to stereotype people, but to just be a helper, to be able to help give people a voice and to be a support person for them.
Thank you, ma'am. So, what strategies have you used to respond to diversity challenges?
Well, I think one is, and I've certainly grown in my life path, I think there was a point where someone could make a comment or say something, and obviously due to human nature, maybe I would get upset, I would get angry, it would maybe cause me to lose sight of what maybe that real goal is. So right now I feel like I work on my patience on a daily basis. I try to be more of a listener initially, right? Thinking, well, what is the truth that I can hear in what someone else is saying? Is there like a commonality I can find with them? Because sometimes I think when you start from a difference and then work your way out, maybe you're not able to establish bonds with people. But what I try to do is I try to go from what do we have in common? And then what are ways that we can grow stronger so that any differences that we have, we can almost combat those differences. So that's probably a little bit more of my personal work style. And I don't like to respond to people unless I feel like I'm educated about an issue. And I also realize that people sometimes operate on implicit bias. Sometimes there's an unconscious bias that we have that we don't even realize exists in our brains, and it limits the way that we can kind of interact with other people.
Thank you, ma'am. So my next question would be, what is the most common mistake in an organization's thinking about diversity?
So the most common mistake I have seen is where people feel like diversity, like it takes too much effort and work to be inclusive, or where people feel like you have to give up something in order to be inclusive. And so I always tell people, no, you actually gain something. You get stronger. You grow in more positive ways when you're more diverse and inclusive.
Thank you. So, what's your understanding of diversity and why it is important to this position?
My understanding is that diversity is just about all of the many things and ways that make us who we are, all of the many things that make us unique. I think that when you think about diversity only in terms of race, you limit all of those different unique things that you can learn about people and places and backgrounds. And so my understanding is that diversity is about more than race. It's about looking at ethnic background. It's about a person getting to know who they are. It is about us being able to think critically for ourselves. It is about us trying to figure out how we're more alike than different, and then working based upon those things to grow stronger. If you think about it as children, when children are born, they almost accept anybody, right? Sometimes we have to tell them, don't touch the fire, don't touch the stove because it's too hot. We almost have to tell them, don't talk to strangers because something bad might happen. So they are so open, they're so ripe for many of the different things that can happen. And sometimes, obviously we still have to warn people about the negative things that can happen. But I feel like as adults and as seasoned professionals, we have to check our own bias. We have to realize that there's more to the world than just our little nook and cranny corner, and that if we realize that we can do a little bit better in both our professional and our personal lives.
Thank you so much for your interview, ma'am, and your time, and it means a lot to me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you for your professionalism and your questions. I appreciated it.
Thank you.
Thank you.